Right, Ian, tell me about how you bought the Charlton Tribune and why you bought it.
Well, Ian, I started my printing career with my father, who owned the Weatherman Express in those days.
In the neighbouring town?
Yeah, 18 miles from Charlton, I think it was. And we're talking miles, but anyhow, I worked through that at 14 till I went in the Air Force during the Second World War, and I was in the Air Force for 3 years. Upon discharge, I went back to work at the Weatherman Express, and until I got married and had 2 girls, and found that my father was still working in the old 1914 wage groups.
Oh, right.
And I couldn't survive, so I went out and got jobs and finished up selling. I had a war service home, and I sold that and borrowed £4,000 in those days, which was big money, to buy a cafe business, which my wife and I ran for 7 years at Wedderburn. And after we sold that, I was looking for some connection to go to, something else to do, and this business came up at Charlton in the Charlton Tribune, and I came up and had a look through, and in my opinion at those days it was much more advanced than the Weatherman Express was, because in those days the Weatherman Express was completely hand-set type job. There was no liner type or anything else.
I remember that.
And anyhow, we had a look around, and I said to Coral, what do you think about it? And we had 2 girls, just with Julie and Charmaine that you've just met. And anyhow, then when we came to Charlton, came up and had a look and finished up meeting Ian's mother and talking, and I didn't have enough money to buy everything, but anyhow we finished up getting and borrowing enough money to finish the purchase, and I came to Charlton in 1961.
So that my mother was then, had been remarried.
Yeah,
and
she was Mrs. Wood.
Mrs. Wood.
Yeah,
and I know that Bill Wood, her husband, wanted to get rid of the business.
Yeah. He was quite pleased, and I think he was pleased that there was someone around, and your mother was a bit dubious about lending the money out and not getting it back, And he, of course, Bill wasn't a poor man, was he, really?
No, he wasn't. Can you remember how much you paid for it?
Yeah, I think about £8,000, I think it was, or something.
Because it was still in pounds then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So you got the Charlton Tribune, the Quambatook Times, and the Witchy Proof News.
Yeah, they were all combined.
All for £8,000.
Yeah.
And that was in 1961. 61.
Yeah.
Okay, so you then took over the business, but you got rid of the Witchy Proof News and the Quambatook Times. Were they the first ones
what happened was that I went over to Quambatook and had a look around there, and like it was completely, the town had almost barren by that time, and I had the correspondent there, and there was no advertising and everything, so I happened to be coming back through Bort one day, and I said to the proprietor of the Bort Standard, do you want to buy a business? Because
that was Laurie Meadows,
yeah. And he was a old Quambatook boy, actually. I think he started his trade at Quambatook during the paper there in those days. And he says, oh yes, he says, how much do you want for it? I said, £150.
Right.
So he said, I'll take it.
So there was no negotiation.
I was pleased to get out of it, because there was no advertising left in it, and it was a complete day's work for everyone to set it up and print it and distribute it, and I think the circulation was only about 200 or something at the most.
Well, it was 400 when I was running it, but the town was getting smaller, and there was nowhere it could go but down.
That's right.
Yeah.
And anyhow, funnily enough, I had some friends over there that I used to be in camp with, a mate, and he used to be a contractor and a road contractor, and they'd taken over with a pub over at Quambatook, and
Which pub was that?
Look, I don't know. There were two.
There was Beamish's and the Quambatook.
One on the corner. I think it was the Quambatook on the corner as you went in or something. And he was. He'd been there, and I met him when I was in the Air Force at Cressy, and his wife came from, a little place near Colac, and of course I kept in contact with them afterwards, and my wife and I went up and saw them a few times there, and but not that he had anything to do with it, but it's a funny story. You go back to it, and
so what I missed a bit here is that when Laurie Meadows bought the Quambatook Times, he closed it down, did he?
He'd be included into the board standard.
Included into the board standard. Okay, so what happened with the Witchy Proof News?
Well, you're printing the Witchy Proof News at Charlton, and of course I think he was very crooked on your mother because starting...
Who was that? Huey Buchanan.
Oh, that's his name.
Yes, he used to run the Ensign.
That's right. Yeah, couldn't think of it, you see. And anyhow, there was two papers being printed. His paper had about 2 stories in it a week, sort of thing.
And they were very old.
Oh yeah, and he, I happened after I'd been there a while. I happened to go and see him, and I said, "Do you want to sell the Ensign?" And he said, "Oh yes." He said, "I'll sell it for something." So I know I paid $1,500, I think, for that business.
£1,500.
Yes. And that included all the equipment and everything in the old printing office.
To be scrapped, really.
Well, it was. There's a funny thing. It turned out that there was a chap that had a paper at Pyramid Hill, little town, and he was going to start a business over towards the South Australian border, I think. I just forget what name of the town was there. And he said, "Do you want to sell any equipment?" And I said, "You can have the lot for £1,500.
Oh, right. So you bought
I didn't even have to go and dismantle any of it or anything like that. And then...
So you got your money back straight away?
I got money back straight away. And I got... I think then we renamed it back to the Witchy Proof as Ensign, I think. Didn't we? I think we did.
It might have been all the Ensign News
something
or
like
something.
That, but I think it might have taken over the old name of the Ensign after that. And anyhow, I wondered why Rena, Ian's mother, hadn't purchased it, and of course he wouldn't have anything to do with it, and he didn't want any money or anything like that, and anyhow that's what happened there.
So how long did you keep the Witchy Proof Ensign or Ensign News going?
For quite a number of years. I just forget how long.
So you were making a profit with it once the two papers were combined?
It was reasonable, we had a good, reasonable little business sort of thing.
So can you remember when you decided to close it down?
Well, I used to go up and report the council meetings at Witchy Proof and those days, and then the chap that owned the Sea Lake Times, Sea Lake Times I think it was Les Clossy. And we were made good friends, sort of thing. And then we got talking one day, and I was getting that way that I wasn't an enthusiastic editor, put it that way, and I'd never done any editing in my life, and I was just a plain old printer, more or less. And I had to learn the trade of the editorial side of it. And anyhow, we were talking one day, and he said, "I've got 2 boys coming up." He said, "I wouldn't mind taking over your business there." So I said to him, "Oh, well," I finished up, and I forget what I sold it to him, and I sold it to him for that, and he had combined it then with the Sea Lake Times.
With the Sea Lake paper,
And that's what happened there. That's where I got out of that there.
So that then left you with just the Charlton Tribune.
But of course, at that stage, you'd all gone. You and Jeff had left the area.
That was my brother.
Yeah, yes. And in those days, and anyhow, I finished up. Only had the local paper there. Well, then we got down to only 2 on the staff. Then was Earl Crosley and I think after Jeff left as machinist, Brian Lynch came along, and they like the football club here wanted some footballers, and I think I advertised for a football printer, and of course Brian Lynch came, and he was a machinist, and anyhow he a bit of an all-round printer, but he was mainly the machinist, and anyhow it was interesting when he came, and like, I think he threw out more jobs than he ever printed, even the mistakes he made. But and he was a very nice fella.
Yeah.
But anyhow, in the end, he left, and he started an insurance business with a chap called Ian Jackman that you probably knew, Ian. The Jackmans when you were here.
Yes, I think they. So I remember the Jackmans.
Yeah,
so what period was this then?
This would go into the 70s, early 70s probably.
Oh, right.
And anyhow, then what happened then? Oh, that's right. And then I got approached from St Arnaud. Did I want to sell the business? And I'd had enough.
Was this St Arnaud Mercury?
St Arnaud Mercury, yeah. And of course they'd been backed by a chap that had won more or less won tats, because he bought Poseidon shares at 20 cents and sold them for about $2 a pound, no, $200 or $100 a share or something. They went sky high, and his name was Mac Batters.
So
whether you knew the name?
No, I don't remember that. So he owned the St Arnaud Mercury.
No, well he only lent the money to the bloke that was working there. Like
okay.
He took over the financial side of it, I think.
Was Ella Ebery there then? Or?
Yeah, she was. I think she was there. Yes,
as the editor.
Editor, I think she was.
Right. So they approached you, and you decided then to sell.
Yeah.
And that's when both of the papers were combined into the North Central News.
Mainly because of the equipment was getting very old, and needing replacements. That was the big thing that swung me, because I knew I'd bought an Intertype machine, brand new, and it cost me more than the business cost me in those days. And of course there was other things that had to be replaced, so I didn't. I just thought to myself, well, I wasn't born to be an editor, actually, to tell you the truth, and of course I was a bookmaker as well, and I enjoyed that more than anything else. So I had that income coming in, and I had a few dollars too. And like by the time I'd got out of everything, and I thought, oh, that's nearly enough to live on if I retire. Of course, I think it was 50,000 quid at a pound. No, it might have been dollars in those days. It must have been dollars, I think, in those days.
But that's what your assets were, $50,000.
Something about that, but it was 16% interest on everything, you see.
Oh, right.
And I was getting about $8,000 a year on interest. And that was enough to live on in those days, It was quite plenty to live on.
So again, what period was this? Can you remember when you actually sold the paper?
Well, I think it was 76 or 78, and I'm not sure, one or the other. But anyhow, they did continue to print the Tribune for the first couple of years.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, they didn't combine it immediately.
I didn't realise that.
And now I would work more or less work for them as their correspondent here, and I moved out of the Trib office naturally, because they'd come and taken all the equipment. And
so what did you sell it for? Can you remember?
Oh, look, about $16,000 or something.
So Australia was then in dollars.
Yeah.
Yes. $16,000.
Might have been 17, something like that. So in that vicinity, anyhow.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So you sold it for more than you did the Quambatook Times.
A little bit more, yeah. And a little bit more they got for the ensign too. But anyhow, it was just one of those things and not only that, but the town had gone back a bit since I came. Like I can remember when I came here that, there was so many business. Every business was full. There were 4 banks. There were 4 grocery stores. There was dry cleaners. There was bloody I don't know how many. Every business was occupied. There was car dealerships and things that you
yes,
got.
It was
an ad
quite a
for.
flourishing town.
It was a flourishing town when I bought it, and then it started, and then the banks started closing off, and until they got down to one bank in the place, and they all advertised each month, sort of thing.
So when you sold it, you then just went, you stayed a bookmaker.
Yeah.
And so you got out of the newspaper
Well,
business.
more or less, I did do work as their correspondent for a couple of years, I'd imagine.
What, for the
Mercury, for the Charlton Tribune.
Yes.
And then they combined it with the St Arnaud Mercury, and they called it the North Central News.
Yes, which it is today.
Which is still going today. But I think I just read somewhere about that they were going really bad over in St Arnaud, like at that stage, and they were lucky to have Matt Batters come and take over their financial side of it. And I think that was I forget the chap that was running the Mercury. I can't think of his name, to tell you the truth.
No.
But he was there for some time, and I didn't have much to do with it after that. Like after I'd finished my correspondence with them, and I'd send their news over each week, and then they kind of then wanted to get into something else, and I just said, oh well, look, I'm not interested anymore. And
So how old were you then?
Well,
Because you're 88 now, aren't you?
yeah, I'll be 88 in
Very
June.
youthful, 88, I must say.
And I think I would have been, it'd be, what are we into now, 76, 25? Oh, well, it'd be 30 odd years ago, wouldn't it? Yeah. So I would have been in my 50s in those days, I suppose 56 or 7 or something.
We're talking today at Easter in 2013, the 150th anniversary of Charlton. So it's great to talk to you and great to have this on record, and I know my family as well as other people will be interested.